You are listening to the Wyn Thomas File.
Time for my first guest today. That is Christopher Swann, award-winning Christopher Swann. And the plays, the Forgotten Trilogy. Where did the idea come from?
Well, it all came about in lockdown, really. I mean, I've been writing for nearly 50 years off and on, mostly for other people and then television and film scripts. And everybody said I wrote very well and nobody put any money into making the damn things. So I was sitting in lockdown and just before lockdown, a friend of mine had talked to me about these two guys who went into a chapel in France to choose the unknown warrior. He said, it's a story nobody knows anything about. And I'd no intention of writing a trilogy at this moment, but I had decided that I was going to write a play because I stood a much better chance of hearing my words come back at me in a theatre than I did in a cinema, really, although I'd had lots of things on television. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that's nice. As a child, I was always interested in going down the unknown road. You know, you'd always be in a car with your parents and you'd see a road to somewhere and you'd wonder where it went.
Yeah. And
you never went down it. And certainly where I grew up, there are still roads that I haven't explored. And I set out to write a two-hander. And as I was about the two officers, and as I was writing it, I got a tap on the shoulder. These 3-4 other characters suddenly appeared. Then asked me why or how. They just did. And this play sort of just emerged in front of me. It was quite weird. I have to describe it as. I still can't quite understand where it all came from. And then a friend of mine, a writer who I think you know, P.G. Rose.
Yeah.
I sent the script to him and I said, is this any good? Normally writers are horrible to each other, you know. And he said, my dear, we have to put this on. So I went, oh, okay. So he paid for a reading in London and it went very well. And one of the actresses there, after we'd done it, said, oh, I wish someone would write a play about the women of the ATA. And I said, who? Mm-hmm. And she said, oh, the women of the ATA. And I said, who are they? And they said, this extraordinary group of women who were impossibly brave in the Second World War, delivering planes in what became known as the Forgotten Service, mm-hmm. the ATA. And that's where the idea of forgotten came from. I'd already written about a forgotten soldier. And we are the only country in the world that don't know who our unknown soldier is, apparently. I don't know if it's true, but that's what they say. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that sort of took form. And then I realised that 10 years ago, I'd spoken at length to Peter Tate, an actor in London, about Admiral Byng, the forgotten admiral, the one we shot. We've never shot a senior commander before or since, but we shot Byng. And they all became about really contemplations on mortality, really, and through these 3 forgotten stories. And so I ended up with a trilogy rather by mistake, really. And also, to my enormous good fortune, all 3 have been performed. One of them will be performed again here in November. There's an audio recording of it. And then the madman who started all this going decided he wanted to publish them. So they're now published. So that's the story, really.
Indeed, yes.
It's been a great joy because I've met some really interesting people when I was writing in terms of the books. And I got some wonderful actors working with me, which I couldn't be more blessed, really.
Yes, I mean, you're part of the Centenary Project, as we know. But you've worked for so many different people. Just give us some background. You've worked with the BBC, ITV, you've worked with Sky, and also many other people, Discovery as well. So it's an incredible background you've got there before you actually got onto this. Let's talk, if I can, just break these plays down a little bit more, if you wouldn't mind. Let me just go into them with you. So, One Night is based on an actual event in 1920. As you said, the officers were tasked with picking the unknown warrior Well, as you say, we don't know his name, although some people must know his name somewhere. And this play contains also voices of the past, ghostly voices of those poor dabs who had a terrible tragedy of World War One. That's part of the play as well, isn't it?
They were the three characters.
That tapped you on the shoulder. Right, okay, yeah.
They were, spoiler alert, the ghosts that appear. You don't know they're ghosts until halfway through the play. And they're based on all the reading I did around quite how horrendous this all was. There's some really extraordinary memoirs. We all know about the poets. We all know about Rupert Brooke. Mm-hmm. But there are some quiet memoirs about what it was like about the First World War is a transition from the romance of war to the reality of war.
Yeah, yeah.
And the people were, they went to war with a skip in their step, and they came back, most of them destroyed. Mm. The extraordinary song I used in the play by Vesta Tilley, of all people, who at the first verse is about going off to war, and the second verse is about the broken people coming back. It's wildly contemporary. And all three plays deal with contemporary themes. When I finished the first play, it was 2 weeks before the Ukraine war, and they're doing it all over again.
Yeah.
They're in trenches,
they're
dying, they're being blown to bits.
Mm-hmm.
It all really goes back to a moment when I was a 12-year-old choir boy walking down the steps of the Albert Hall, leading the choir out because I was the tallest. I stood at the back, hoping to keep out. And they said, "Oi, come to the front." And there is somewhere a film of me doing this. And I led them all down the steps into the arena and up onto the stage. And all I remember really from that day, well, I remember quite a lot of things, but the thing I remember most vividly is looking out as a 12-year-old in my cassock and my surplice and everything over this sea of veterans from both world wars and watching as the poppies fell on them. Oh, and although I have no military contacts at all, because I'm writing as an outsider to the military, that image of the dignity and I don't know what it was, the pathos in front of me is never, I can still see it. And I suppose the root, that feeling about loss. All three plays, the second play, the ghost appears in the middle. I kill someone and she comes back. And the third one, I kill the central character at the end. But it's this reflection on sort of the passage from life to death, really, is what it's all about. It may sound really grim and dull, but they're all very funny. There's a lot. The actors turn up and went, "Oh," and they'd start to read them, and they said, "Oh, that's a joke." I said, "I know it's a joke. It's funny. There's nothing in life that doesn't have humour." No, I'm afraid
there's always humour. There's always humour, isn't there, in tragedy, isn't there? Yes, indeed. Yeah. I don't know if you agree with me, but World War One always, what comes to my mind is the mud, the trenches, and the barbed wire. That's always the one that catches me there. What those poor men had to endure to get to the enemy, and some of them didn't even get to the enemy, did they?
Yeah. Well, one of the characters, one of the lines is "Run, run! I never fired the bloody gun." He'd been a soldier for a day. The description of the approach to the front, it smelt, it was foul, it was rubbish. And if you look at the pictures of Gaza now, that's what they were walking through. Not as densely, because Gaza was very dense. And I've been to Gaza, so I know what it looked like before. Mm-hmm. And it's those descriptions which I was describing of quite how horrid it was. And then for the first year, not much happened. It was like they were in a phony war. And then it gradually got worse and worse and worse and worse as the time went by. And I tried to give a sense of how that spread out, just not from those images we have at the front, but it spread out to all the countryside and everything behind. It was horrible.
Yeah.
And also that one of them dies through a lack of concentration. And that was the other thing. They were so tired by the end. They sort of given up.
Let me go into a bit more on play number 2, which, as you said, is called Up in the Blue. Those incredible ladies who delivered aircraft during World War II. 300,000 aircraft they delivered. That figure's just incredible. And
the ATA as a whole delivered 300,000.
Oh, okay.
The girls delivered about, 30,000. They go out every day and they'd be given a chit. And on it, there would be about 5 deliveries.
Yeah.
And they would go to a factory. The men all thought it was ludicrous, women flying planes. And they would get out, and some of the men would look in the plane to try and find the pilot. And that's true. There's a wonderful book called The Sky and I by Veronica Kurtz, which I used very much as the basis of all this.
But no.
I used there are lots of books. Go on, yes, sorry.
Yeah,
I talk non-stop.
So no radio, no guns, so much bravery, really, no reward. And maybe, I'm not sure if you've researched this, was there enemy aircraft possibly about?
There were. The only planes in the sky were our fighting planes piloted by the men, and the German planes piloted by the men. And the men and women of the ATA flying, quite often they pick up a plane they'd never flown before. They'd be given a little handbook. 10 minutes later, they were supposed to take off, and they often did. And they were flying in this airspace from the factories to the airfields. Some of them did die, but mostly in accidents. But if they had met a German fighter, they'd be dead ducks.
Yeah.
But they were flying quite low, because they had no radar, they had nothing. They had to memorize the routes they were flying. But the important thing about this play, set in 1944 and 45, is that for the first time in our history, because of a woman called Pauline Gower, these women were paid exactly the same as men to do the same job. First time it had ever happened.
Right.
When the war ended, it stopped. And it's still an issue. So it's basically a feminist play about these extraordinary women. And the only men in it are damaged. One of them is a one-armed pilot. And there were 3 one-armed pilots in the ATA. And the other is a doctor with a gammy leg. And it's really, there are 6 women in it. And they are fantastic. And we did it here. And it is the most joyous play, really. And of course, Amy Johnson was in it.
Oh, right.
And Amy Johnson died in the 80s. She died delivering a plane over the Thames estuary.
That's right, yeah.
And her body wasn't found until quite recently.
Yeah.
And that was an immense tragedy at the time, because there was a song that they used to play called Amy, Wonderful Amy. I mean, we always underestimate the role of women in our history, because they're much less backward about coming forward than the men are. And this was a particular moment in our history where we did the right thing, and they were just being extraordinary.
We'll go on to play number 3 finally, and Swing, 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 Admiral Byng, chanted by a mob at his execution. Convicted of not doing his duty during the 7 Years' War. Wow.
It's not quite true. It's not quite true. It was sung at his execution. Byng was the son of Lord Torrington, who was Admiral of the Fleet. Lord Torrington had 11 sons, and only one of them went to sea, and that was Admiral John Byng, known as Jack. And he rose up through the Navy. He was known as a kind of dull but safe pair of hands. And he was second only to the Sea Lord when he died, actually. But there was a sudden panic in about 1750. I can't remember the exact date off the top of my head. That the French were going to take Port Mahon in Minorca. And Port Mahon was a very important naval base.
Yeah, I've been there.
And
yes,
the French, they were Henry Fox, Anson, and Lord Halifax were obsessed with the idea that the French were going to invade across the Channel, which they never did. So they kept all their best ships back, and suddenly they thought, "Oh my God, we're going to lose Port Mahon." So they equipped Byng with a squadron, which was called by his close friend Captain Harvey, who's known as the Naval Casanova, with good reason, to go and defend Port Mahon from the French. Even before he left, the French had landed 15,000 soldiers on Minorca, and were going to take the island. By the time Byng arrived, having been double-crossed by the guy in charge of Gibraltar, it's a typical story, English government. Gibraltar, our great port, had been so run down, there were no spares. So when Byng got there, he couldn't repair his ships. So he went on. He got to Port Mahon, and they were trying to defend this fort. And the French were already there, and the French fleet were there. And he engaged the French fleet. But they shot high to disable the British fleet, which is a tactic used, and then ran away. Because this fleet come out of Toulon was all brand new, and the French king had said they could fight when they weren't to damage any of the ships. So the moment they disabled the British squadron, they tottered back off to Toulon at some speed, and they were led by a very nice man called Admiral Galissonier, and the Duke de Richelieu, who was a favourite of Madame de Pompadour, led the fleet. And they all think Byng had been great because he tried to engage and he'd fought a hapless fight. But Byng then made a terrible mistake. He decided to withdraw to Gibraltar to repair the ships because most of them were unseaworthy. But by the time he got to Gibraltar, news had arrived over land that it was all his fault from at least one of the captains, who's rumoured to have been a coward. When he got to Gibraltar, he was cashiered. He was stripped of his rank and taken back to England. And the politicians inflamed the mob. At one point, they wanted to put him in the Tower for having left, having lost Port Mahon. I mean, this is a terrible, terrible story. He was really, really badly treated. And eventually, he was court-martialed, but only accused of not doing his utmost. He was not accused. He was innocent of cowardice. He was innocent of everything, but they convicted him on essentially Fox, Newcastle's and Anson's insistence, although Anson backtracked, of not doing his utmost, and the penalty for that was death. And the king, George II, was not a very nice man, refused to give him a pardon because he was convinced he was a coward. And Pitt went to him. Say this isn't a contemporary story would be wrong. And he said to the king, "Your Majesty, you should pardon Byng. Parliament want him pardoned." And George II said to Pitt, "You have persuaded me, Mr. Pitt, not to listen to the views of Parliament, but to the people."
Oh my goodness!
And so he never pardoned him. And Byng, there's quite a lot of documentation of the last 2 days of his life. And Byng faced it in the end with equanimity, and he gave an extraordinary speech as he was shot. But he was executed on deck of the Monarch. They're not called HMS until much later in the century. And the Monarch was ironically a French ship, which we captured and renamed, which happened quite a lot. And he was shot at 12 o'clock on a Monday in a storm. And he'd been measured for his coffin by his servant, standing up against me. Yeah. And he'd seen his coffin, and he was shot and taken off and buried in the family vault. And for 250 years, his family have been trying to clear him. But what interested me was the idea of a man who knows to the exact moment when he's going to die. He knows precisely when he's going to die. And it's the effect on him and those around him during those last 2 days of the inevitability of being shot, really.
Wow, incredible.
Right,
Sorry. Yes, a long time before Nelson said England expects every man to do his duty. He did, but he got shot for it. That's really the breakdown, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, of course, he was the last admiral to be executed as well. I mean, he didn't execute many admirals, did he, to get to that figure? No.
I'd like to correct that. He's the only admiral.
He's the only admiral, okay.
and he's executed at a moment. I mean, there are no naval uniforms until 1748. He was the first admiral to wear a naval uniform, which was only for the admirals and the captains. And what you think of as the Navy, which is these epauletted, sort of swaggering matelot sailors, that only comes in once we started winning. Right. They only began to dress them properly after about 1780, when Nelson started to win everything. Yeah. And everybody knows that, but this particular type of Navy, which is the crossover between the sort of Tudor Stuart Navy to the modern Navy, he's shot at a very particular moment in naval history. Yeah, yeah. And as you know, that wearing a lot of fancy stuff probably cost Nelson his life, because he was stuck at like a sore finger on that decking. Yeah, indeed, yeah. Anyway, thanks so much for doing that with me. It's absolutely brilliant to talk to you. Well, the next performance is November the 8th here.
Oh, right, and okay.
Then, having done 4 plays and a musical this year, I think that's enough. And a comedy. I've written the next one's a comedy, and we've done that already. That's called
Marvelous.
3 Pianists into a Bar.
And can I just say that the plays have now turned into a book, and they're available from Lulu Publishing.
That's right.
Okay.
And I'm very, very proud to be interviewed by Thomas.
Oh, okay.
Because my grandfather, I hadn't really thought about it. My grandfather was Reginald Thomas. He came from a family that originally came from Stadwell.
Yeah,
and
right.
he between the two wars, the First and the Second World War, he wrote all the Sexton Blake stories.
Oh, right. That's a good one.
I think this is where I get it from. He was a really accomplished writer. But most of it was ephemeral, so my cousin and I tried to chase it down.
Wonderful.
So, I have proper Welsh DNA.
Nothing wrong with that. Thank you very much for being my guest today.
That's my pleasure. I've enjoyed. I hope everyone enjoys it. Come and see my plays. That's the thing.
I have to. Yes, indeed. Yeah.